Hello, everybody. Welcome to the pregame show of Candid Conversations. I'm Mark Gorman, the CEO of Matrix Solutions. I'm here with my omnipresent co-host, Brenda Hedrick. How are you doing today, Brenda?
I'm great, Mark. How are you? Nice to see you. We're getting to the warmer weather, although of course, as I always indicate, you're in warm weather, but here in Western Pennsylvania, we're getting there. We can feel summer coming. We can feel getting back. We are fully vaccinated, ready to roll,
It's all going. So we're coming back in 2 weeks. So the really probably the greatest thing for our viewers is next month, we're back in the Matrix studios.
Yeah,
that's right. Brenda and I will be back live together.
Do you think they've been redone, like remodeled? You know how like sometimes when there's
I'm sure a massive update. And when we say massive update, we're going to put the computer on a different platform with its camera and move it around the office.
That's right.
It's actually funny. So when I think about our mobile studio, it reminds me of my first job out of college. So I worked for a credit card bank out in San Francisco. And of course, we had our dummy terminals at the desk that were connected to some mainframe multiple states away. We did have a portable PC. And when I say a portable PC, it was literally a massive PC with its keyboard and, the old CRT screen on a cart.
Oh.
That you would roll around the office.
I was just gonna say, and when you mean portable, I knew it was going there. When you meant portable, you meant like we wheeled it around from one location to the next. Yes. I remember that. It's unbelievable where we've come with technology and computers. But a couple things, I just current events, and this is appropriate for us. We're in the media space, so it's award season. I personally have not watched any award show. I know maybe that's not good, but I know the Academy Awards or the Oscars are this Sunday, and I read that projections are going to be way down. Viewing. What do you think? Have you watched any? Or
okay, so the last awards show that I've seen, I think was 2 years ago. I went to the Gracies with you out in Los Angeles.
Yes. Shout out Gracies. Yes.
If you don't know, Brenda sits on the board of the Alliance for Women in Media.
Yeah.
And every year they host the Gracies, and it's an award show honoring really women in all different facets of media. Yep. So it's a great event. It's been around for 40 plus years. I don't know.
70, going on 70 years.
Okay, yeah. So I'm really glad with the.
Not always is the Gracies, but yes, a long time. So yep.
So phenomenal organization. And so normally I have maybe seen 3 award shows in my life. And if you count the first season of American Idol, maybe 4.
Well, I used to watch, and I used to make it a point to every movie that was nominated for an Academy Award, I would have tried to see prior to. I just it hasn't happened. And I think it's got to be difficult. And I know there are some, they're now like, they're sort of the hybrid. Some people are there and some people aren't. So I think that that's probably, maybe a reason why the numbers are down, and maybe, it's a unique year when it comes to even viewing content and media, given, theaters, et cetera, were closed. So it should be interesting.
I mean, that's it, right? How we've been viewing content. And I know we'll talk a little about this in the upcoming Candid Conversation, just sort of viewing habits, et cetera, but movie theaters especially, right? I love going to the movies. So not that I do it that often, but I do really enjoy it, but certainly haven't done it in probably a year and 2 months, 3 months. So will be interesting to see how that kind of comes back. And also, I think we have so much, I was just thinking about this earlier today. There's just so much content out there on so many different platforms. It's almost overwhelming for me to even figure out where I need to go. And I wonder if really as a result, or how many shows do we really watch as a nation that's common? I'm not sure, right? How much do we come together under one or two shows? I mean, the last big one I can think of was your favorite, Game of
Game of
Thrones.
Thrones, absolutely. Yes, that's it. I was thinking of that, and we struggle. I don't want to say struggle, but trying to find. I haven't found a show since Emily in Paris, or I mean Stanley in Italy, right? Those have been my shows that I've been watching, and I haven't found one like Game of Thrones. I think I did mention that I sort of binged Homeland and found that really really good. I do want to ask you. I know you're not a massive soccer fan. I am. So there's this big tying it back into ratings. There's this big thing going on in Europe or in England, and it wasn't whether Harry and William talked to each other or looked at each other over the weekend, although I did watch a little, and it does look like they communicated, if you will. I find it so interesting how we as Americans are so enamored, if you will, with that story, thinking, a few hundred years ago, we did this thing called the revolution to not be,
Of course, yeah.
but we love to see how it's going with Harry and William. But looks like anyway. I do watch soccer, and I watch soccer it's interesting. I watch it we're big fans of the English Premier League, and NBC has it, and they're moving some of it to Peacock, which I have a whole nother conversation to talk about with NBC on Peacock and streaming. But some of the soccer groups, and of course, a lot of them are owned by Americans, and they're, are trying to form this super league. But today, which people are not for, but today the conversation was, is there an audience for it? And how are we going to, commoditize all of these sports? Because even though live sports have come back, has advertising came back in the same numbers for live sports? And I think it will, right? I mean, I think.
Well, I agree. And I
Yeah.
would say what's interesting to me about soccer in particular, of course, we do have soccer leagues now in the US, professional soccer. I think there was, if I remember correctly, there had been a fit and start over the years, but it's of course now doing better primarily because our Latin population is growing, right? They really
Absolutely.
are the population in this country that have said, yep, we love soccer. So I do wonder, will they be that interested in British soccer? I don't know. But certainly they have made an impact and made professional soccer in this nation sustainable.
Agreed. One last little, current event for me, and because I know this happened in your neck of the woods. J-Lo and A-Rod no longer.
Yeah, I
Is
don't.
that impacting you?
Not at all. But I was thinking about shows, and there is one show that I'm looking forward to seeing. So I'm probably going to say his name wrong. Topher Grace, is that how you say it?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. The new show Home Economics. I love sitcoms, and I haven't found a good one in a few years. So I'm really looking forward to actually figuring out how I can view that, which is funny because I have no idea when it airs, but I will find it on some on-demand platform so I can view it.
I remember him from that '70s show. Has he been in anything since?
Been in a lot of movies.
Yeah. And actually, I think is he a producer or director, or he funds, right? Is he?
God, I have no idea.
I think
But
he
I
does
do think he's a pretty good actor, though I would say, unlike the Penny from The Big Bang Theory that was in Flight Attendant, where wow, was she amazing. Phenomenal actress. I would say he's good, but I often find I see the same character. It's like Jim when you're watching Jack Ryan. It's like, oh, there's Jim from The
right.
Office. He's in the FBI.
It's,
So
it is hard. It is sometimes hard to picture him as this special, operative, tough guy when you're like, yeah, that's Pam's husband, Jim. Before you get to your candid conversation, which I'm incredibly excited about, and we didn't plan it this way, but it is women, and your panelists are all women, and they are leading women in sales and media companies. And we talked a little bit about the Alliance for Women in Media, which is really good, and that focuses on content for women. But I think it's just really incredible, and I'm so excited that you're speaking to 3 women who lead revenue operations for their respective media organizations. And as you know, I think the more women can impact the bottom line, the greater it is for the industry. It is for all women, and I love to see that. So I'm especially excited that your panel is just some really powerful, smart media leaders, and they just happen to be all women, right? So very cool.
Exactly. As you know me, I always like using the term individuals
That's right.
because I never like to measure somebody against necessarily just 52% of the population. They're amazing individuals. So
Yeah.
let's get started. Deanna, why don't you take us away and let's get to it.
Have a great candid conversation.
Thanks. Welcome everybody to April's Candid Conversation. As Brendan and I just talked in the pregame, we are honored and graced by three amazing individuals. We have Missy Evenson. She is the VP of Sales from Scripps. We have Barbara Bekkedahl. She is the President of Weather Group Ad Sales and Client Partnerships at the Weather Channel. And finally, certainly not least, we have Becky Meyer. She is the Senior Vice President of Sales from Gray Television. So thank you so much for joining us here today. It's going to be great. So we are talking to, as we mentioned, three great individuals who are also part of the Media Ad Sales Council. So we at Matrix, we recognized, I'm going to say, a deficiency in the industry regarding the media ad sales ecosystem, and really felt that it was important to get together a distinguished, intelligent, vibrant, and versatile group of individuals to start talking about how do we come together as an industry around automation, convergence, and inclusion, and start promoting different ideas so that we as an industry can move forward in a more coherent manner, rather than somebody doing this here, somebody doing that here, a tech company doing this or that. We come together as an industry and say, hey, here are maybe some of the best practices that we can all get around and follow. And that in and of itself will help move us forward. Obviously, being from Matrix, I think it's important. And if you want more information, you can certainly look it up online at matrixformedia.com. Go to the Insights tab. There you'll see MASC. You can look at that. And now we're going to get started. So thank you to the three of you for joining. Before we dive into the topics, why don't we start by asking a simple question? What prompted you to join MASC, and what are you hoping to gain, or what are you hoping to promote therein? So I'm going to start clockwise. And so Barbara, that either makes you either the lucky one or the unlucky one.
Sure. Well, I've been in the business for quite a while, and the impact of technology, automation, new ways to buy and find TV audiences is fascinating. And working at a smaller independent company, it's important for us to really understand these trends, understand what the landscape is, who the best partners are. And so working with an outside group is incredibly helpful to increase our vantage point. So that's why I was interested in joining.
Phenomenal. Missy, you are now to my other side. You're next.
I would say ditto to everything Barbara just said. And I would add that I was excited to join the group because I feel like right now in our industry, maybe more than ever, there's power in numbers. And if we can all get more people on the same page to move some of these specific agendas forward, I think it ends up serving the industry as a whole really well. So it was, I don't know, maybe it's finding your peers on the island of misfit toys, but it's been super fun so far. But I like that we're all in one boat, as I like to say, trying to row one direction. I think will serve us all better at the end of the day.
Certainly, couldn't agree more. And Becky.
Obviously, everything that has been said, but I think most importantly, I'm proud to be part of a group that is genuinely interested in making local video easier to buy and transact and operate in. And then I come from a little bit of a unique position with Gray. We bring ourselves to the market differently than everyone else. And we also have 88% of our markets are RPD and smaller. So I like to make sure that we've got a voice for those medium and smaller size markets as well, because the top 20 get a lot of attention.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's dive in. So we're talking about, from the MASC perspective, we're starting to promote ideas that start looking at the industry 3 to 5 years from now. And so I like to think of it as, if we're talking about what to promote, we have to understand, what do we think that future looks like? And so I think of it setting that table, the frame of reference to give us a structure around the rest of the conversation. So Becky, I'm gonna ask you to kind of start. When you think about us 3 to 5 years from now, because I think of it like this. I know a few years ago, Next Gen TV was so much of the conversation. How are we gonna do this? But now everybody's moving to OTT, whether they're live streaming, whether they're doing on demand, et cetera. I'm curious, from your perspective, one, what do you think the bulk of consumption is going to be? And how do you think we're going to be delivering ads? Will we be in 3 years with dynamic ad insertion, impression based? How much of spot TV will be left, and what will it look like? And I know that's a lot. We could probably spend 2 hours doing that alone.
That is a lot. And I wish I would be able to say that more would change within a 3 to 5 year period. But I do think it's going to be really interesting what happens with viewership, I think, in the fall, when we've got a lot more content coming out from the networks. You've got sporting events that are going to be more on the regular, and what those viewing habits are going to look like as the world comes back to life, so to speak. But I think that, looking at the next 3 to 5 years is critical in building the bridge to next gen. I think both the sell side and the buy side kind of get a little bit weighed down with some legacy pipes that they have going in and out of their places of business. And that's going to be a challenge to move forward and automate. So I think it will be difficult to say that ads will be served up in a different way in 3 to 5 years. But I think moving forward, you want to be able to serve an ad to, like a computer. Your television hanging on the wall is going to be like a family computer, and it's all going to have offshoots of different devices that stem from there. So I'd like to say, in the next 3 to 5 years, I think the most critical thing that we need to do is define an impression and what that means across video.
And I'm curious, because we certainly are going to move on to the impression conversation. And I see somebody is at the edge of her seat, because I know she has some real opinions about this, Missy. I'm looking at you. But I am curious, Becky, when you obviously know what Gray's doing, right? But you have conversations with other people in the industry. And what I always like about this industry, even though there's healthy competition, I also think there's a lot of healthy respect. And people tend to talk to people at other companies in a way that's more collaborative. I'm from finance, so I've been knifed several times. So do you think the way Gray is looking at the future world is similar to how other groups are, or do you think it's different?
I think it depends on what your footprint looks like and where your priorities are. I think Missy would probably have a different, a different hierarchy of what the focus is. Ultimately, I think our goals are very similar, but how you get to that end result looks different based on kind of where you're coming from.
Yeah, fair enough. And so Missy, I know if you all know Missy, you will know what I'm about to say. And I'm going to quote her. And when I say quote her, I'm going to say it sort of like she says it. She will tell you that a local dealer doesn't care if they get 50,000 impressions. They care if they sell 10 more trucks. Am I getting that right?
That's pretty spot on.
So let's talk for a minute because we always talk about impressions, and I think a lot of that conversation is around the idea that the buy side wants to be able to buy television like it buys digital, and digital's impressions. And I would argue in some ways digital is shorthand for outcomes, but maybe not. So take us through your thoughts on outcomes versus impressions, and what you think the difference is and the good and the bad of each.
Look, I think Becky touched on it really well, and that step one is we've got to have a definition of an impression that works the same across any platform. And I don't think there's a lot of people in media right now that understand that there's differences there. So I think there's definitely an education process, probably in a lot of our businesses, from our salespeople through managers, and certainly on the buy side, right? So I think that's absolutely a great place to start. I think, and Mark, you've heard me say this, right? I mean, for the most part, whether it's Nielsen or ComScore, it's the currency until it isn't, right? So I kind of see the industry right now as two parallel tracks, if you will, right? We've got to continue down the path of agreeing on an impression and getting moved to that model. There's no doubt about it. But I also feel strongly that at the same time, we also need to be trying to solve for really good attribution and outcome-based selling, which is, you have heard me say it a million times, I gave you $30,000 and did I sell 30 trucks or whatever the goal would be, right? So I think attribution, moving that forward, I don't think they're mutually exclusive. I think we just have to continue to kind of push at the same time and move forward. I do think, I think the way that we reach the viewer gets really, really interesting, kind of like you and Becky were talking about, right? I do think with so much content out there, and so much really good content, all the way from local TV stations to whatever you're watching on Netflix, right? It's a lot of choice. You know, I think strategically, it's no secret for our company at Scripps, it's we actually think in 3 to 5 years, there's a big return to over-the-air television, right? Like we're kind of, my analogy for this of late has been, you know what? Let's think strategically about owning the highway and not worried about so much like what cars drives on it. We should all solve for every car. Let's just open up all the ways people want to view content, and then be able to insert advertising wherever the people want to be. Like, I think that's kind of our mission at the root of this. I mean, ultimately the viewer is our customer, and you know, look, if we're not putting great content out there, it's all for naught. People sometimes forget. I'm glad to hear Becky talk about that too. Like, we have a responsibility to put really good content out there, and then allow people at any income level, at any age, to have really good access to it. So while measurement and attribution, all that good stuff's kind of on one hand, I think the content and accessibility piece is the other key.
I'm going to disagree with you on something.
Okay, love it.
This is, of course, my opinion, but I actually think the content for the most part on Netflix is pretty weak. I think it's not that, I don't think it's that good.
Yeah.
And in fact, I heard on the radio this morning, yes, I listened to live radio. I heard because in Miami, I love the radio. There's a lot of high energy dance music. So the one DJ was saying he watched something on Netflix and it wasn't that great. I think what Netflix has is a platform that delivers content to you easily. They make those suggestions, but I often find myself thinking this show sucks, and I'll watch 1 or 2 episodes and then I'm done. No, I'm being serious, and it's interesting because when I watch other providers, like I'll watch a show on, let's say, ABC or CBS, I'm often astounded by the better quality of acting. Now, I will say the morning show or whatever it's called on Apple TV with Jennifer Aniston and Reese Witherspoon is pretty good. So I think it's interesting because you say that. I think you're right. There is content, but I do think a delivery platform that makes it easy is also important.
I wouldn't disagree with you at all. I mean, ease of use is obviously something to be considered. I think it's interesting though that I feel like there were a lot of people that had opinions over the last few years that as the television audience aged, right? I mean, 80% of the television audience, broadcast television audience, is going to be over the age of 55 in the next few years, like right as rain and getting older. I'm in there too with you, buddy. Trust me. But what's like, I think it's really cool and outstanding is just because we're getting old doesn't mean we're not comfortable with technology. I mean, my gosh, my future mother-in-law is 84. She's more proficient on every single device and app than I probably will ever be. So I think that's actually a really good point, Mark. But like people are extremely proficient, especially in like that 55 plus age group. I think that's pretty cool too.
Yeah, absolutely. Now,
so I could jump in here, Mark, for a quick
Sure.
one. You know, I really do appreciate from Missy and Becky that outcomes can be so clearly defined by, hey, I'm the car dealer, my spots are on, my sales are up. And in the national front, that's so much harder to get that like visceral results from clients. A lot of times they're building their brand image and they're creating brand positioning. They're not trying to actually drive foot traffic, or they are, but it's less obvious. And so I think the attribution piece is the holy grail for advertisers, but so difficult to turn into a currency. And certainly, you know, data-driven linear is where, you know, the industry is headed on the national side. But that is very hard to scale and very hard to create currency. So I'm sort of like feeling the 3 to 5 year time frame is just not enough to make. It's going to be increments, but it's never going to be wholesale digital delivery of ads based upon who you are and what you're in the market for quite a while.
And I think that's interesting because we've talked, and I'm jumping around here, but we've talked about this idea, national network versus local and what you're doing. And I always think impression-based sell to an extent, and I say this to an extent, I believe like 99.9%, impression-based sales are really call to action sales. And they don't drive branding necessarily as much. And so I was wondering, like from a network standpoint, how impactful are outcomes versus maybe reaching a broader audience, et cetera. So you certainly hit upon that. I do wonder though, in that, I'm going to call impressions almost more like a currency transactional based model. What do we think happens on the upfront side versus a more just-in-time type of model? How do you see the future morphing there, Barbara?
Well, I think a lot of it's dictated by the supply and demand marketplace. So, you know, advertisers during the pandemic were freaked out and had to get out of all of their upfront commitments, or tried to, but were hamstrung because that's not how network works. And so many of them tried to pivot towards more flexibility, et cetera, but then they find themselves right back now in scatter paying premiums to have that, to be able to, you know, get flexibility. So, you know, we're seeing unprecedented demand in the upfront, and they're going to pay higher prices because supply is down. So it just makes no sense from their perspective. I'll be enjoying it tremendously. The other piece that I felt was fascinating is the resurgence in the interest of direct response. And I think this started pre-pandemic when direct-to-consumer companies, you know, really hip companies, all were using DR to reach audience and have that immediate feedback on sales. And all the flexibility of direct response is inherent in how you deal with it. And so there's been a real strength in that marketplace on the national front as a result of, again, what marketers are trying to do and have all that flexibility as well. So just a lot of different observations based upon real world, I suppose.
And then, you know, we had talked about, and I'm really curious, the idea, I mean, and you all know I believe this, you can show the same advertisement to the same person and the content in which it's wrapped, it can have a different impact. I'd love to understand how we define, you know, premium. When I think of impression-based world, I think, okay, yes, there's premium, but I also then, if I say I have premium content, I have to show that getting that one impression should have more cost versus that one impression, say, on a let's say one of these fast channels that's coming up. So I think of even A&E as an example. A&E's regular channel, is that premium versus the content they developed 5 or 10 years ago now that they're pushing into a fast channel? Could they charge more or less for the different components? I'm not sure, per impression. So I'm curious how you think about premium, and really we'll start with you, Barbara, but I'd love to hear everybody's take on this, the idea of premium, maybe sub-premium and non-premium.
Yeah, so for me, premium, you know, has some quality associated with it. It has, like for the Weather Channel, we talk about the trust of the brand and how that has a brand halo effect. I'm sure Becky will talk about viewed live, which we also talk about as an enhanced environment because you're watching it live, you're not zipping past the commercial. And it's also like, you know, hey, when you're watching the Oscars on Sunday, if you do decide to watch an award show, you know, again, you pay a premium to be amongst all that glitz and glamour. And so the same thing with NFL, you pay to be wrapped in that experience where people are excited about what they're seeing. So I do think there will always be a premium for that content, and there's tons of research which shows it has higher attention, higher engagement, more brand lift, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I guess I would also ask, you know, Becky and Missy, when you think of live streaming, even live streaming on the OTT, I am curious about engagement. Is it because I know on demand, right? Studies have showed on demand, advertisements on demand have higher engagement because you are choosing to watch that program. I am curious on live streaming OTT versus over the air live, if you know if there's a different level of engagement, if that's been measured or not. I have no idea, but I think it would be interesting.
It's an interesting question. I don't know the answer to that, but I think just like day parts, you know, I think the definition of premium might look different for different advertisers because one advertiser might get wrapped up in a social, you know, branded content thing that works much better for them than running an NFL on Sunday afternoon. So I think agencies have long had a hierarchy of day parts where prime or sports might be at the top of the list and then late news might be next, and you can interchange some for another. So I would see the agencies be setting their priorities, and like Barbara said, there's economics to this. It's supply and demand. We can't just produce more inventory, so we're working with a finite amount of, you know, of availability.
Yeah.
Mark, I would add that, you know, we do know some things, right? Specifically in the OTT space. We know that most of the ads that we serve in that space end up running on connected TV, right? So same as big screen on the wall, right? So, and that does seem to have more value to buyers, right? At least in our experience thus far. And you absolutely can get data back if you're streaming newscast, programming live, whatever. I mean, you can get completion rates and things like that, right? Off connected TV data. So, but like it's early on still, right? You've got to even still technically address issues. Different companies from what I understand, are at little different levels in terms of like their ad stacks and how they serve, right? So I think some people are still trying to solve for a terrible viewer experience in OTT, but specifically in connected TV. Nothing worse than like watching ESPN or A&E, whatever you want to call it. And it's like, we'll be right back. And you're like, oh my God, I'm just sitting here in the dark by myself. It's really creepy. Until like, you know, I don't know, some ad comes on and you're like, okay, they didn't like leave me stranded, right? So I think there's like some technical stuff in that, but I also think back to what we were talking about. I do absolutely think brand safety still seems to matter to the buying and the advertiser community for sure. I think Barbara and Becky both mentioned that as well, that there is a premium on content that's viewed to be more brand safe, especially in the digital space, which we've all seen that for years, but in the connected TV space in particular, safety, verification of impressions, and I mean, it matters a lot. Now, if people are willing to pay 20% more for that or whatever that ends up being, I don't think we really know yet. I think we kind of all have to get a little further down that road, but I mean, hopefully so. I know everybody on this call is probably investing a lot of money to get there and to learn more to see if that value is going to exist. So I think we're all hoping for an ROI on the investments that we're making in tech for sure.
It's interesting too, because technology is one of, I would say, when we think of MASC, or at least I say we, because I'm assuming you're thinking just like me. When I think of MASC, I think there's two primary components, right? I'm going to say three primary players in this field. There's the sell side media companies, the media companies that sell advertising inventory. There's the buy side, and why I think there wants to be, everybody wants a place where things work. I do think the buy side, you know, their objective is to buy the cheapest seats on the plane, really just, you know, make it. And then there's technology companies. And I often think of, you know, to your point, Missy, I think a lot of times from technology, one, I think of it this way, two ways, right? Digital was born from technology. So in the digital world, technology vendors are really the big profiteers. They're making the most money. And in the traditional industry, it was not born from technology per se, right? I mean, technology was used and involved, but when we start looking at OTT, when we start looking at impressions, one of my fears for you, not for me, for you, is that we want so many things and so many things done. Technology is going to be needed to handle all those different components. And when you have such a heavy technology stack, it's going to cost a lot of money. How do you all think about that? And I'd love to hear all of you, because you're all involved in media ad sales, but media ad sales today is not just about calling somebody trying to promote or getting an agency to call you and saying, I'm looking for this. It's also technology. You're also, all three of you are technologists. So whoever wants to, I'm going to start with Becky, but you know, I'd love to hear everybody chime in, your thoughts, etc.
Well, I think a lot of people that know me very well, Mark, would completely disagree with you calling me a technologist. So, but realistically, you know, one thing that, and I don't know if anybody shares my view, I think we're all getting too fixated on each other's workflows in correcting this, from the buy side to the sell side. Gray looks different than Scripps, looks different than Nexstar. All these companies, all the agencies are different, you know, Weather Channel. So what we need to focus on is where we intersect with our touch points. That's where our tech needs to work together. We don't necessarily need to be doing things exactly the same along this path, but where we intersect and come together, and it could look different. Everybody's got different technology. So you might need a dongle or an adapter for somebody to plug in this way, but we all need to, at various points in the chain, be able to plug in and have those touch points work.
I'm going to interject for a second before other people chime in, because there's something that I've heard you say before, and I'm gonna, again, I'm the worst quoter, so this is probably not a direct quote. But automation won't happen until business rules change. And I hear what you're saying, Becky, but I also think that if you have too many dongles and too many different plug-in devices, everybody's going to be a Best Buy spending a fortune. It's my fear for you, not for me. Again, I'm okay. I'll make all those dongles, et cetera, and I'll charge you for them. But I do fear, because I hear what you're saying, but how do we get more of a somewhat of a commonality across that supply chain?
Yeah.
One thing we're doing, because again, we're a relatively small, being one cable network at the Weather Channel, we're working with OpenAP. So they have really come around over the last 2 years. We've been talking to them, but come around to really respect that we're an independent company. We're not like NBCU, where we're going to build our own audience platform. We can't afford all of those costs. And so they have made everything more friendly, more open, and ways for us to participate in the market, both from an automation point of view, but really most importantly, we want to participate in advanced TV demo targeting, so we can get closer to guaranteeing on outcomes versus just women 25 to 54. So that's been something that's been great for us, and this is the first upfront we'll be transacting on OpenAP. But I do also have one other observation, which is the pandemic again had everybody working from home. And now, it's time we can reopen, or we're talking about it. And we ask our employees, and many of them and many of the ad agency people are happy working at home. And so you're going to see more automation because they're comfortable just working on their laptops. It's sort of almost like a human behavior that I didn't grow up with. It was like, go to the office, make friends. That's what you do. And now a lot of the younger generation aren't as tethered to that. So I do see automation accelerating, especially on the ad agency side.
I do have a question from the audience, and I'm going to say that I might not fully grasp this question. So I'm going to throw it out there, and I'm going to put it out, because I want to make sure, and I got to read it because I can't magnify this thing. So I apologize. What if OTA could have digital ad insertions that was separate from broadcast, 2 different impressions, OTA and digital, for the same live TV?
All day long.
Yeah, and I'm going to assume that's the plan. Yeah.
Yeah,
I would think
100%.
so.
That's exactly the model, because again, when we get there that we all agree what an impression is, hopefully we will find that someone viewing in that space is different than someone viewing, whether cable or streaming or whatever. And then we're full circle back to all those audiences potentially end up having more or less value depending on where the data sends us or drives us, right? But at the end of the day, absolutely, just being able to serve different messages to more sets of eyeballs is good for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Barbara said something, and Missy, I'm going to ask you about this. This is not on our list of pre-approved questions. People watching, you have to understand, I'm with 3 prima donnas here. They needed a list ahead of time, and they had to sign off. So, so I'm really breaking the rules here. She might just get up and leave. But I know doing guarantees is something that Scripps had done now for, I don't know how long it's been, but you guys were one of the leaders in this space as far as experimenting and doing things. Can you provide us any insights on how that's going? I don't know what's privileged or not. So if there's privilege, I apologize. But I would love to hear the progress you all have made and some lessons learned from the experience.
I think like the nutshell or the term used a lot, right, is pay for performance. We're a little over 2 years down that road. We're very happy with the results for ourselves. But Becky touched on the heart of it. It makes it work. And what I don't know, I talk about all the time is the business rules have to change. you know, and Mark, you've heard me say it, like, we just have to agree that there's no reason that a buyer's time should be spent at their desk haggling over 1/10 of a point anymore. Those days have to change. That you're going to go back and forth 3 times on a same time period, make good for a different week is ridiculous. Like, let's agree on what an impression is. And then if you buy 500,000 impressions from me, I'm cool once we're there. I'm on the hook for that, and I owe you that. But that all that day-to-day haggling, that's where all the glue in the engine, as I always say, is, right? But we can all get to whatever, and each company is probably going to end up playing differently in a pay-for-performance space, or if at all. But all of the underlying belly of that is business rules. Like, just tell me maybe some old school word, I know, but like, if there's programs that are hit listed for you that your client can't be on for whatever reasons, and a list of day parts they need to be in, we all get that. That's still stuff, that stuff absolutely still makes sense in today's environment, because every advertiser is different and they're targeting a different customer. But just a lot of that back and forth old school business rule stuff, like, let's just get comfortable. And I call it file 13, right? Just wad it up, put it in the trash can, and let's get a little nuts and rewrite the playbook on some of that stuff.
And I'm curious, because we're coming close to time here, but I do think of the whole, because I think that bleeds into the whole make goods and all that negotiation, et cetera. I think of this like this, and I'd love to understand, because we started out about the future, and here's some of what's going to happen in the future. I think spot television eventually will be a couple things, and it will depend on the network, because I can see, you know, like the Weather Channel, I'm in South Florida, when there's a hurricane, it's pretty much all I'm watching, right? Because I'm scared to death that I'm going to lose my home. But certain premium events, the Super Bowl, the Final Four, maybe even a few premium shows that everybody likes to watch when it airs live, those will be spot television. The rest will be impressions. As that occurs, does the whole make good even go away? Because I'm thinking, if I'm buying on the Super Bowl and you want to give me the, you know, midnight movie with Elvira, I'm not interested in that switch. What do you all think is the future there, the make good in general? Yeah, I can see Barbara a lot. She likes my sense of humor.
I was just reading a chat comment, sorry.
Oh, I thought it was my Elvira comment, but I'll tell you now.
I mean, I think the process of making good and waiting for each side to respond is the most manual piece of what we're trying to correct. If we automate that, it's automated, but it's not very innovative. I think what we need to focus on is more innovation. And I think stewardship and pre-buy should all be automated. Nobody should be spending human hours, minutes, seconds on that.
I agree. I'll jump in. I mean, I'm with Becky on that. I want to go old school. I kind of want to almost go full circle and go old school, where I want salespeople spending their time solving for a client need with a really great solution and getting an awesome outcome, which probably sounds like, I don't know, 1960s TV sales, but like in all this stuff over all these years, like, what's the client really trying to solve for? I feel like in a lot of ways has gotten lost. And I'm like, can we just get back to like doing great work that sells a lot of whatever people are trying to sell to solve a consumer issue? That's
exactly
the fun
right,
part.
Missy. Right. Well, in local sales, local direct sales has always been about outcomes. The local AE at the television station does not show up in a client's office, store, whatever, on Monday morning and provide them a report about how many people saw his or her advertising. They ask the questions: how were your sales? How many whatever did you sell? How was your weekend traffic? those are the questions that's their recap. That's their post-buy is Monday morning over a cup of coffee and with actual results.
Well, we are at time. I really want to thank the three of you for participating here and also being part of the MASC. I think it's clear to everybody watching the value that you all bring to that council. And I'm very, very thankful for your time today. I think this was a great conversation. And that's it. Thank you, everybody. And we'll see you next month.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.